The summer heat in Los Angeles had reached that particular intensity that made the air shimmer above the pavement. On Waverly Drive, beneath the dappled shade of jacaranda trees, a small wooden lemonade stand stood out against the backdrop of multi-million-dollar homes. Its hand-painted sign, with wobbly letters proclaiming "Lemonade $2," fluttered gently in the occasional breeze. Behind the stand sat Sophie Miller, an 8-year-old with determined hazel eyes and two missing front teeth. Her dark curls were pulled back into a ponytail that had gradually loosened throughout the morning, allowing wisps of hair to frame her freckled face. Unlike most children running lemonade stands in summer, Sophie didn't smile much. Instead, her small face carried a seriousness that seemed out of place on someone so young. Mrs. Abernathy from across the street had been watching Sophie from her porch for the past hour. The elderly woman sipped her tea and wondered why the child's parents would let her sit out in this heat alone. She'd purchased a cup earlier, noting Sophie's polite thank you and the way the girl carefully placed the $2 bill in a jar labeled "Hospital Fund" in the same wobbly handwriting as the sign. The sleek black Porsche Taycan that slowed to a stop in front of the lemonade stand seemed utterly out of place, like a shark appearing in a kiddie pool. The electric car hummed quietly as the driver's side door opened and a tall figure emerged, unfolding from the luxury vehicle with casual grace. At first glance, there was nothing particularly remarkable about the man. He wore well-worn jeans, a simple black t-shirt, and a baseball cap pulled low over sunglasses. His dark beard was slightly graying at the edges, but there was something in his deliberate movements, in the way his presence seemed to fill more space than his physical form, that caught Mrs. Abernathy's attention. Sophie straightened her posture slightly as the stranger approached, but her expression remained solemn. She reached for a plastic cup with small, determined hands. "Hi there," the man said, his voice warm and surprisingly gentle. "Is this fresh lemonade?" Sophie nodded. "I made it this morning. It's $2. Sounds perfect." He reached into his pocket and pulled out his wallet. "It's pretty hot today. Business good?" Sophie shrugged, pouring lemonade from a glass pitcher that looked almost too heavy for her small arms. "Not really. Most people just drive past." The man nodded thoughtfully, watching her struggle slightly with the pitcher. "Need some help with that?" "I can do it," Sophie replied, her jaw set with determination as she carefully filled the cup without spilling a drop. The man smiled, the expression transforming his face in a way that caused Mrs. Abernathy to lean forward in her rocking chair. There was something familiar about him that she couldn't quite place. "I believe you can," he said, accepting the cup. "Thank you." He took a sip and his eyebrows raised. "Wow, that's really good lemonade. Did you make this yourself?" For the first time, a flicker of pride crossed Sophie's face. "My mom helped with measuring the sugar, but I squeezed all the lemons. That explains why it's so fresh." He glanced at the jar labeled Hospital Fund. "Mind if I ask what the hospital fund is for?" Sophie's brief moment of pride faded, replaced by that too-adult seriousness again. "It's for my mom. She's sick." The man's posture changed subtly, softening as he lowered himself to a crouch to be at Sophie's eye level, a gesture that seemed instinctual rather than calculated. "I'm sorry to hear that. That must be really hard." Sophie nodded, looking down at her hands. "She has something called multiple sclerosis. Sometimes she can't walk very well or gets really tired. The doctors say there's special medicine that could help her feel better, but it costs a lot of money." She gestured to the jar. "Dad says insurance is being stupid about it." The man's soft laugh held no humor. "Yeah, insurance can be difficult sometimes." He looked at the jar, which contained only a few bills and some coins, perhaps $20 in total. Then he looked back at Sophie, who was watching him with those serious hazel eyes. "What's your name?" he asked. "Sophie Miller," she replied. "Well, Sophie Miller, my name is Keanu." He held out his hand formally, and after a moment's hesitation, she shook it. "I think what you're doing for your mom is really brave." Sophie's shoulders relaxed slightly at the compliment. "Dad helps too. He works 2 jobs now, but I wanted to do something." Keanu nodded, understanding in his eyes. "Sometimes when people we love are hurting, we need to do something, anything, to feel like we're helping." "Yeah," Sophie said quietly. "Exactly like that." A crowd gathers. Mrs. Abernathy was no longer the only observer of this exchange. A couple walking their golden retriever had stopped on the sidewalk, the woman nudging her partner and whispering something that made his eyes widen as he looked more closely at the man crouching by the lemonade stand. A teen on a skateboard nearly lost his balance as he rolled past, doing a double take before pulling out his phone. Keanu seemed oblivious to the growing attention. He took another sip of lemonade, then asked, "How much are you charging for a cup again?" $2, Sophie replied. Keanu nodded thoughtfully. That seems like a really good deal for lemonade this delicious. He reached into his wallet and pulled out what appeared to be $100 bill. Would it be okay if I just paid you with this? I don't have anything smaller. Sophie's eyes widened. That's way too much. I can't make change for that. Keanu smiled. No change needed. I think your lemonade is worth every penny. Sophie stared at the bill in disbelief. But, tell you what, Keanu continued, I'm pretty thirsty today. Maybe I could buy the whole pitcher? For me and, he gestured discreetly to the small crowd that had begun to gather nearby. Some friends? Sophie followed his gaze, noticing for the first time the small audience they had attracted. Her cheeks flushed with embarrassment, but she nodded. Okay, if you're sure. I'm sure, Keanu said firmly, placing the $100 bill in the jar. He stood up and turned to the onlookers with a friendly but slightly reserved smile. Anyone else want some excellent lemonade? Sophie made it herself. It's the best I've had in years. The effect was immediate. People who had been hanging back, pretending not to stare, suddenly surged forward. Phones appeared from pockets, though most people seemed hesitant to point them directly at Keanu, instead angling for subtle shots that included both him and Sophie. Is that really who I think it is? A woman in yoga pants whispered loudly to her friend. It's him, the friend confirmed. It's totally him. Within minutes, the crowd had grown to over a dozen people, all eager for a cup of Sophie's lemonade. Keanu stepped back, allowing Sophie to serve her new customers, though he stayed close enough to help when the pitcher needed refilling from a larger container stored beneath the stand. Sophie's serious expression had given way to one of bewilderment as person after person approached her stand. Some paid with exact change, but many followed Keanu's example, telling her to keep the change from $10 or $20 bills. The hospital fund jar began to fill. Mrs. Abernathy had abandoned her porch to join the growing gathering. As she accepted a cup of lemonade from Sophie, she leaned in and whispered, "Do you know who that is, dear?" Sophie shook her head, glancing at Keanu, who was chatting quietly with a starstruck teenager. That's Keanu Reeves, Mrs. Abernathy said. The movie star. Sophie's eyes widened briefly, but then she frowned in concentration as she counted change for another customer. The name meant little to her. At 8 years old, she hadn't seen any of his films. All she knew was that before his arrival, she had made $12 all morning. Now her jar was filling with more money than she had ever seen. The story unfolds. As the initial excitement settled, Keanu found himself sitting on a lawn chair that someone had brought over from their car. Sophie continued to serve lemonade, now with the assistance of Mrs. Abernathy, who had appointed herself coordinator of the impromptu event. So, Sophie, Keanu said during a brief lull in customers, tell me about your mom. What's she like? Sophie's face brightened. She's the best mom ever. Before she got sick, she used to be a kindergarten teacher. She knows all the best stories and does different voices for all the characters. Sophie demonstrated by deepening her voice dramatically, then shifting to a squeaky pitch that made Keanu smile. She sounds wonderful, he said. Sophie nodded. She still reads to me every night, even when she's really tired, and she's teaching me to play chess. She says it keeps her brain sharp when her body doesn't want to cooperate. Chess, huh? That's pretty advanced for your age. Sophie shrugged. I'm not very good yet. Mom always wins. But sometimes I think she lets me get close to winning just so I don't feel bad. That's what good parents do, Keanu said softly. They lift you up, even when they're struggling themselves. Sophie looked at him curiously. Do you have kids? A shadow passed briefly over Keanu's face so quickly that most observers missed it. No, he said simply. I don't. Sophie seemed to sense she had touched on something sensitive. With the directness that only children possess, she changed the subject. Why are you famous? Mrs. Abernathy said you're in movies. Keanu's laugh was genuine. Yes, I'm in movies. I pretend to be other people and tell stories on screen. Like when Mom does the voices for characters. A bit like that, yes. Are you good at it? Keanu pretended to consider this seriously. Some people think so. Others probably not so much. But I enjoy doing it, and that's what matters most, finding something you love to do. Sophie nodded sagely. Mom says that too. She says I should find what makes my heart feel full and follow that path. She paused, contemplating the lemonade stand. I don't think selling lemonade is my path. My arms hurt from squeezing all those lemons. This drew a burst of laughter from Keanu and the people close enough to overhear. The sound attracted the attention of a man hurrying down the sidewalk, a tall, harried-looking figure with Sophie's curly hair and hazel eyes. Sophie? He called out, confusion and concern evident in his voice as he took in the scene. His daughter at her lemonade stand, surrounded by at least 20 strangers, with Keanu Reeves casually seated beside her. Daddy, Sophie waved excitedly. Look how much money we made for Mom's medicine. Sophie's father approached cautiously, his expression a mixture of bewilderment and protective instinct. What's going on here? Mr. Keanu bought my lemonade, and then all these other people wanted some too. Sophie explained, gesturing to Keanu, who had risen from his chair. Mark Miller, Sophie's father said, extending his hand automatically while still trying to process the situation. Keanu Reeves, came the reply as they shook hands. Your daughter makes exceptional lemonade. Mark's eyes widened slightly as he confirmed what he had suspected. Thank you. I'm sorry, this is a bit surreal. Keanu smiled understandingly. I was just driving by and saw Sophie's stand. Thought I could use some refreshment. He deliberately downplayed his role in the gathering, a gesture that didn't go unnoticed by Mark. Dad, look! Sophie interrupted, holding up the jar now filled with bills. For Mom's medicine, Mark looked at the jar, then at his daughter's excited face, and his eyes grew shiny with unshed tears. Sophie, honey, that's amazing! I haven't counted it yet, but I think it's a lot, Sophie said proudly. It certainly looks that way, Mark agreed, his voice slightly hoarse. He looked back at Keanu. I don't know what to say. Your daughter did all the work, Keanu replied. She's quite the entrepreneur. Mark smiled, placing a hand on Sophie's shoulder. She gets her determination from her mother. So I've heard, Keanu said. Sophie's been telling me about her. Mark's expression softened. Caroline would be mortified if she knew about all this. She's not one for attention. Where is your wife now? Mrs. Abernathy asked, rejoining the conversation. At her physical therapy appointment, Mark replied. I was supposed to be watching Sophie, but got called into a virtual meeting. I was keeping an eye on her from the window. He gestured to their modest home behind the lemonade stand, a small but well-maintained bungalow that stood in contrast to some of the more ostentatious houses on the street. She was perfectly safe, Mrs. Abernathy assured him. I've been keeping watch from my porch all morning. Mark smiled gratefully at the elderly neighbor. Thank you, Mrs. A. A deeper connection. As the afternoon progressed, the crowd eventually dispersed, though not before every cup of lemonade had been sold and the hospital fund jar was stuffed with bills. Many had taken selfies with Keanu and Sophie, most promising to share the story on social media. Local news had even arrived after someone tipped them off, though they respected Keanu's polite request to focus their coverage on Sophie and her cause rather than his presence. Mark had invited Keanu inside to escape the heat and media attention, an offer the actor had accepted with gratitude. Now they sat in the Millers' modest living room, where family photos revealed a vibrant woman with Sophie's curls and Mark's smile, Caroline Miller in healthier days. The diagnosis came 3 years ago, Mark explained, keeping his voice low as Sophie played in the backyard, visible through the window. Caroline had been experiencing fatigue and balance issues for months before that, but we both just chalked it up to the stress of raising a 5-year-old while both working full-time. Keanu nodded, listening intently. The first 2 years weren't so bad, Mark continued. She had to give up teaching, which broke her heart, but the initial treatments seemed to help. Then about 8 months ago, she had a major relapse. The neurologist recommended this new treatment that's showing promising results, but, he gestured vaguely, Insurance won't cover it because it's still considered experimental. How much is the treatment? Keanu asked quietly. Mark hesitated before answering. The initial round is 60,000, with potential follow-ups depending on how she responds. Keanu's expression remained neutral, but his eyes reflected understanding of the impossible situation the Millers faced. We've been piecing together what we can, Mark said. I picked up consulting work on top of my regular job. We've got a GoFundMe going. Caroline's parents contributed their retirement savings. He smiled sadly. And now we have Sophie's lemonade stand proceeds. How much have you raised so far? Keanu asked. About half, Mark admitted. We're hoping to start the treatment next month, even if we have to finance the rest. The doctors say the sooner, the better. Keanu nodded thoughtfully. Before he could respond, the front door opened and a woman's voice called out, "Mark? Whose car is that in front?" Caroline Miller appeared in the living room doorway, leaning slightly on a cane. She was thinner than in her photographs, her curls shorter and streaked with premature silver, but her eyes held the same warmth captured in the family photos. Those eyes now widened as she registered the presence of a Hollywood star in her living room. "Oh," she exclaimed, a flush rising to her pale cheeks. "I'm so sorry. I didn't realize we had company." Mark rose quickly to help his wife to the couch. "Caroline, this is Keanu Reeves. He, bought lemonade from Sophie's stand today." "All of it, apparently," Caroline said with a bemused smile, having noticed the crowd dispersing as she arrived home. "Sophie's beside herself with excitement. She's counting money in the backyard and wouldn't even stop to say hello to me." Keanu stood and offered his hand. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Caroline. Your daughter speaks very highly of you." "The feeling is mutual," Caroline replied, shaking his hand. "Though I'm still trying to understand how a simple lemonade stand led to this." "Sometimes life takes unexpected turns," Keanu said simply. Caroline studied him for a moment, then smiled. "Indeed it does." The back door slammed, and Sophie burst into the room, clutching the jar. "Mom! Dad! We made over $700 today!" Her face was flushed with excitement, all trace of her earlier seriousness gone. "Mr. Keanu started it by giving me $100 for one cup, and then everyone else wanted lemonade too, and they all gave extra." Caroline's eyes filled with tears as she pulled her daughter into a gentle hug. "That's amazing, sweetheart." Over Sophie's head, she mouthed, "Thank you," to Keanu, who shook his head slightly, deflecting the gratitude. "Actually," Keanu said, reaching for his phone, "I might be able to help a bit more, if you're comfortable with it." The Millers looked at him questioningly. "I know some people who might be interested in contributing to your GoFundMe," he explained. "With your permission, I'd like to share the link." Mark and Caroline exchanged a glance, a silent communication passing between them. Caroline nodded almost imperceptibly. "That would be incredibly kind," Mark said, his voice rough with emotion. "But you've done so much already just by stopping at a lemonade stand. Consider it payment for the best lemonade in Los Angeles." Keanu replied with a smile. "Sophie has real talent." An unexpected gift. 2 weeks later, Caroline sat in her neurologist's office, clutching Mark's hand as Dr. Patel reviewed her file. "So," the doctor said, looking up with a smile, "it seems we're ready to proceed with the treatment plan we discussed. Your insurance situation has been resolved." Caroline blinked in confusion. "Resolved? What does that mean?" Dr. Patel looked equally puzzled. "According to our billing department, the treatment has been fully paid for. Not just the initial round, but the entire projected course over the next 2 years." Mark straightened in his chair. "That's not possible. We've only raised about half the amount for the first treatment." "Well, someone made up the difference," Dr. Patel said. "And then some. The billing office received a wire transfer yesterday with instructions that it be applied to your account." "From whom?" Caroline asked. Dr. Patel shook her head. "The transfer came through a foundation that wishes to remain anonymous. This isn't entirely unusual. We sometimes get patients whose care is covered by charitable organizations." Mark and Caroline exchanged a look, both thinking the same thing but afraid to say it aloud. That evening, as they sat on their front porch watching Sophie play in the yard, Caroline scrolled through her phone, checking their GoFundMe page for the dozenth time that day. "Mark," she said quietly, "it's up to $82,000. Mark leaned over to look at the screen. Sure enough, alongside dozens of smaller donations, there were several substantial contributions from names they recognized from entertainment news. Actors, directors, producers, many affiliated with films Keanu Reeves had worked on over the years. He didn't just share the link, Mark murmured. He mobilized his entire network. Caroline nodded, tears filling her eyes. And I'm guessing he's the anonymous foundation that covered the rest directly with the hospital. Should we try to thank him? Caroline considered this, watching Sophie, who was teaching Mrs. Abernathy's granddaughter how to play chess on the lawn, using an oversized set Caroline had used with her kindergarten students in her teaching days. I think, she said slowly, the best way to thank him is to get better, to use this gift exactly as he intended, to heal as much as possible and be present for Sophie. Mark wrapped an arm around his wife, pulling her close as they watched their daughter, her face alight with concentration as she explained the movement of each chess piece with exaggerated gestures. Sophie's lemonade stand saved you, Mark whispered. Caroline shook her head, smiling through her tears. No, Sophie did, by being brave enough to sit out there day after day, even when almost no one stopped. She paused. And Keanu Reeves did, by being kind enough to see her. Epilogue. 1 year later, on another hot summer day, Sophie set up her lemonade stand again. This time, however, the sign read, Lemonade for MS Research, $2. Beside her sat her mother, still using a cane but notably stronger, her color better, her movements more fluid than they had been the previous summer. On the table next to the lemonade pitcher sat a chessboard, where Caroline would challenge customers to quick games while they enjoyed their drinks. Business was steady. The story of Keanu Reeves and the lemonade stand had spread throughout the neighborhood and beyond, making Sophie's stand something of a local landmark. Most customers didn't expect to see the actor again, but they came anyway, drawn by the story and staying for Sophie's improved lemonade recipe and Caroline's chess challenges. No one was more surprised than Sophie when a familiar black Porsche pulled up to the curb. Keanu emerged, sunglasses and baseball cap in place, a gentle smile on his face as he approached the stand. I heard the lemonade here is the best in town, he said. Sophie beamed. Mr. Keanu, you came back. I was in the neighborhood, he replied, though they all knew this residential street wasn't particularly on the way to anywhere. Caroline stood carefully, extending her hand. Mr. Reeves, we never properly thanked you. No thanks necessary, he said firmly, shaking her hand. How are you feeling? Much better, Caroline replied. The treatment has been miraculous, really. I still have MS, of course, but the progression has slowed significantly. The doctors are very optimistic. Keanu nodded, genuine pleasure in his eyes. And the chess academy? He asked, gesturing to the board. Sophie had mentioned during their conversation the previous year that her mother had always dreamed of opening a chess program for children. We've started small, Caroline said. Just some classes at the community center for now. But it's growing. Mom's the best teacher, Sophie interjected proudly. She does voices for all the chess pieces to help the little kids remember how they move. I'd like to hear that sometime, Keanu said, accepting a cup of lemonade. $2, Sophie reminded him seriously. Keanu laughed and handed her a $5. Keep the change. No way, Sophie replied, reaching for her money box. You get the proper change today, and Mom says you have to come to her chess class as payment for everything else. Keanu looked at Caroline, who shrugged with a smile. Those are the rules, apparently. Well, Keanu said, accepting his $3 in change, I never argue with the rules. He turned his attention to the chessboard. How about a quick game while I enjoy my lemonade? Caroline gestured to the chair across from her. I should warn you, I'm quite good. Keanu's eyes crinkled with amusement as he sat down. I'd expect nothing less. As they set up the pieces, Sophie served another customer who had arrived, a woman who was trying very hard not to stare at Keanu while simultaneously attempting to capture a discreet photo with her phone. Lemonade is $2, Sophie informed her. Chess lessons with my mom are $5 for 15 minutes. And yes, that's really him, but please don't make a big deal about it. She lowered her voice conspiratorially. He likes being treated like a regular person. The woman smiled, putting her phone away. Just the lemonade for now, please. As Sophie poured the drink, She glanced over at her mother and Keanu, already deep in concentration over their chess game. Her father watched from the porch, a content smile on his face. Mrs. Abernathy waved from across the street. Sophie handed the lemonade to her customer with a smile. A real one, not the serious expression she had worn the previous summer when her heart had been heavy with worry for her mother. The hospital fund jar had been replaced with a collection box for MS research, already containing several bills. Sometimes, Sophie reflected as she prepared another cup for a new arrival, the worst moments in life could lead to the most unexpected blessings. Like a famous actor, stopping at your lemonade stand and changing everything. Keanu's laugh rang out as Caroline captured his night. Sophie smiled. Some people were famous for a reason, and it wasn't always the reason people thought.